Mal, I believe you dropped the last RAF bomb during the Gulf War. Is this true?
Yeah, it is. I had no idea at the time. So towards the end of the war, and people will remember the Buccaneers were deployed to Bahrain because they had the PAVE spike designator, laser designator. So they would fly with the tornadoes from Dhahran and Maharak to drop laser guided bombs. Tabuk, we didn't work with the Buccaneers, to my knowledge, at all, because they'd flown out two tiled pods. So these were the thermal imaging airborne laser designator pods, which the RAF hadn't even bought yet, actually. They were pre production variants that were being trialled, I think, at Boscombe Down. So if a couple of Boscombe crews flew out who knew how to use the tile pod, they trained a couple of the Tabuk crews up as well, so that we had enough people to do 24-hour ops. And then we started dropping Paveway 2,000-pound laser guided bombs. Because by this stage we were doing all our ops from medium altitude, dropping dumb bombs from medium altitude. If you drop enough of them, then you can hit your target. But it's the very definition of hit and miss. So laser guided bombs were the weapon of choice, and made a lot more sense if you're trying to take out hardened aircraft shelters, bridges, things like that. There's no point trying to do that with dumb bombs. And by dumb, I mean unguided bombs. So we got the tile pods out to book and started flying very heavily using those. And so it was, when did the war finish? 28th of February, something like that. So it'd be the night of the 27th of February, I suppose. We were tasked against Habanya Airfield, which is just out to the west of Baghdad. Aircraft hangars there. So the targets through probably the last week or so of the war, 10 days maybe, were all focused on making sure the Iraqi Air Force could not get aircraft in the air to support the ground forces, their ground forces in Kuwait. So obviously, once the ground war started, then there was close air support going on in Kuwait and all the rest of it. But for us, we were still focused very much on bunkers, hardened aircraft shelters, hangars, anywhere that the Iraqis might be storing aircraft that they could drag out to support the fight in Kuwait. That led to some bizarre missions where, and I have no idea how the planners came up with the scenarios, but you would get. We were in Tabuk, which was Western Saudi Arabia. We had tornadoes in Dhahran, in Eastern Saudi Arabia, and in Bahrain, and you would get missions where we would cross in the skies like this as the guys from the East Coast were going to targets in like Western Iraq, and we from the West Coast were going to targets in Eastern Iraq. Made no sense at all. But anyway, that was how it worked out. We'd had, the weather was getting worse by this point as well. So we'd have days where you would flog for 3 or 4 hours to a target, and because you were dropping laser guided bombs, which needed the designator target pod to be able to physically see the ground. If there's cloud in the way, you might try one orbit for a reattack, but you could flog a long way and then end up not dropping your bombs and bringing them all the way back again, which is always a bit disappointing. But the logic of that obviously is that the laser needs to designate the target so that you can hit it accurately. And if you drop a laser guided bomb and it doesn't sense the laser energy, it could go quite a long way, long or short. So you're talking potential for significant collateral damage. So anyway, the mission that we were tasked with this night was against aircraft hangars at Habanya, as I say, out west of Baghdad. And we would have a tiled aircraft doing the laser designation for a bomber dropping the bombs. And being down the back of our foreship the whole time, that meant that on that night I was last to drop. So there was still quite an active air threat to an extent. Mostly the integrated air defence system had been shattered by that point and taken apart, but most surface-to-air missile systems can operate autonomously. They struggle to initially locate targets, but when they find them, they can still fire at you accurately enough. So there were still threats to contend with, and we had support from, on that night, I recall we had EF 111 support for the jamming.
Nice.
I suspect there were some EA6Bs around to do harm firings if need be. And by this stage of the war, it was generally you didn't have dedicated support for your particular mission, so they weren't. It wasn't the EF 111 supporting our attack on that target. They would be positioned in such a location that their orbit could be flown so that they were able to jam in two different directions and support whoever was doing the targets to the southeast while we were doing the target to the northwest. And if you needed help, you would just shout on the radio on your strike primary frequency, and that would cue in the defences to be able to either get jamming down or to get missiles in the air, anti-radiation missiles in the air against the threat system. Or if it was a fighter threat, the fighters would come in and sweep and sort it out. So it was a night mission, and I think it was just the four of us going out, probably. Or maybe four bombers and two tilders. I don't really recall. But anyway, being number 4 in my boss's formation meant Mike Warren and I were the last aircraft to drop. We hit all the houses, not the houses, all the hangars that we were aiming for. Good hits, and actually that was one of the great things about getting the laser designators into theatre, was the attacks that we'd been doing previously. You would occasionally get battle damage assessment back, but if you hadn't physically seen the impact of your weapons, you often never knew what had happened. One of my attacks, actually, I got the BDA when I saw the remains of the target on the front page of the Telegraph.
Really?
Yeah, a few days later when an out-of-date copy of the paper arrived at the book. So it was bizarre how that was working. But yeah, with the tiled aircraft, as soon as you got back home, the videos were available for debriefing, and you could see you'd got all the hits done. So we debriefed the mission. We were given a quick pre-brief on what our next night's target was going to be, which was an airfield in Baghdad, like right in Baghdad. I think it was called Rashid Airfield at the time, because there was concern that Saddam Hussein was going to try and flee the country. So our mission for the next night was this airfield in downtown Baghdad, which would have been, Baghdad was very well attended. Nobody wanted to go downtown.
No.
And we went back to our accommodation, and we just took the opportunity to chill out for a little bit there. We put the radio on, listened to BBC World Service Radio, and lo and behold, there's a ceasefire been announced. Oh wow, we must have been one of the last missions. That's fantastic. Never mind that. Let's go and wake everybody else up. So we did. The boss made a few phone calls, like to headquarters and stuff, to say what's going on. Then are we expected to fly today or what? And they said no. It's all missions are suspended for the time being, so there'll be no flying. So I think the boss probably asked the question. So, like hypothetically, if we were able to get access to alcohol, there wouldn't be any issues with that. No, you're not going to be flying. There are no missions will be flown in the next 24 hours. Right, okay, brilliant. So we then went round all the other accommodation and woke everybody up. It's over, chaps. It's over. It looks like the war's finished. And British Aerospace had a facility called the Lightning Club. And they had some booze in there, so we got into the Lightning Club and had the mother of all parties.
I can imagine.
It got really messy, actually, and then that was kind of that. The war fizzled out for us. We didn't do any more flying, any more combat ops. We had a couple of days of down days, and we were just getting ready to start thinking about, either get back to a flying program or redeployment. And actually, they came back and said, right, we're going to start withdrawing jets from theatre straight away. To book, we're going to work west to east. So to book, we're going to be the first out. So brilliant. So we had a few days sat on the backsides, and then we got flown out. Some guys flew the jets back. So the guys who'd been out there the longest flew the jets back. I flew back on the VC-10. Land back at Larbrook. Before I'd even reached the bottom of the steps of the VC-10, I somehow, and I have no idea how, I had a bottle of champagne in one hand and maybe a bottle of beer in the other. And at the bottom of the steps was the Commander-in-Chief RAF Germany to shake everybody's hand as they were getting off. But,
Really?
hang on a sec, so let me just hang on, just figure out how to hold my beer. Lovely to see you. And that was that. We sort of went off, and we sort of had an inkling that we knew we must have been one of the last missions. But it actually wasn't until a lot later that I figured out that we got confirmation that we were the last RAF bombing mission of the war. And I still, even then, I didn't put two and two together and think, that means I dropped the last bomb. So it wasn't until sometime later again that I figured this out. And one of the guys has done a fantastic job of collating like a database of the missions from the war. And he gave me access to that, and I looked through, and sure enough, we were the last mission, so therefore the last bomb.
Oh.
So I also then discovered subsequently that I was the youngest Tornado GR1 aircrew
That's
out
two
there.
ticks.
That was very close between me and another guy. And somebody said to me, "No, your birthday's like 2 months before his, so you'd have been the youngest." So, oh, okay, right, okay, well,
I'll take that.
fine, good. So I was the youngest Tornado GR1 aircrew out there, and I dropped the last RAF bomb on the wall, as it turns out.